My name is Rachel Monroe, and the first time my stepmother called my career embarrassing, she did it while holding a champagne glass, beneath a ceiling full of lights I had helped program. It was my father's 25th anniversary party at the Brookvale Hotel. The ballroom had been dressed in deep blue linen, warm candles, and a soft gold projection that moved slowly over the walls. My father had wanted something elegant, but not excessive. My stepmother, Valerie, wanted something that looked expensive enough to make people ask questions. She got what she wanted. The room was full of neighbors, old co-workers, relatives, and people my father barely knew but Valerie had invited because they were useful to the image of a successful marriage. I was standing near the service entrance with a tablet in my hand, checking the timing of the first toast. I was not working the party. I had agreed to review the vendor schedule as a favor because the hotel was one of my company's regular partners. And the event manager had asked me to glance at the production notes before guests arrived. That was all Valerie knew, or all she wanted to know. When my aunt asked what I did, Valerie smiled and said, "Rachel has this little job with screens and lights. She's very creative. It's not exactly a serious career, but she enjoys it." A few people laughed politely. Then she added, "Honestly, it can be a little embarrassing when she starts explaining it. We just tell people she helps with parties." I looked at my father. He was smiling at a guest across the room. He had heard her. I know he had. But he did what he had always done when Valerie made a sharp comment, sound playful. He acted as if it had vanished the moment it left her mouth. I could have corrected her. I could have said I was the regional production director for Northline Experiences, that I managed teams who designed visual systems for conferences, hotel launches, nonprofit fundraisers, and corporate events across 3 states. I could have told the guests that the wall projection behind her was controlled by a cue stack my team had built, but I did not, because 20 minutes earlier, the hotel's lead technician had handed me the final run sheet. My name was listed on page 1 under external production approval, and when the opening sequence failed, that little detail was about to matter more than anything I could have said. I had built my career in rooms where everyone had a role and every role mattered. The person operating the sound was not less important than the person giving the speech. The server carrying plates was not less important than the guest making a toast. A successful event depended on people respecting work they did not always see. Valerie's comment hurt because it was the opposite of that principle. She wanted the finished room without respecting the labor that held it together. And for too long, I had accepted that contradiction from her because I thought keeping the peace was more mature than naming the insult. My first job in production had been carrying gaffer tape, checking labels, and learning that the person who notices a loose cable can prevent an entire event from becoming unsafe. I had worked my way through every level of the job. I knew what it meant to arrive before sunrise, to eat dinner standing up, and to stay after guests left because the room still had to be returned to normal. None of that looked glamorous from the outside. Maybe that was why Valerie had always felt free to mock it. She only saw the finished lights, never the discipline underneath them. I had spent most of my adult life trying to make my work understandable to people who only respected jobs they could describe in one sentence. My father understood titles like accountant, contractor, attorney, nurse. Valerie understood titles that looked good on holiday cards: surgeon, partner, director, founder. But when I told them I worked in live event production, she would tilt her head as though I had announced I was still deciding what to do with my life. "You set up microphones," she once asked. "I manage the production design and execution," I said. "So, microphones," she replied. For a while, I tried to explain. I talked about budgets, safety plans, client approvals, electrical loads, stage layouts, vendor contracts, accessibility requirements, show flow, backup systems, speaker timing, and how one miscue could make an entire room feel confused. I told them that events were not just decorations. They were logistics, communication, emotion, and risk management happening in the same hour. The more I explained, the less Valerie listened. Eventually, I stopped trying to earn her understanding. What I did not stop was showing up for my father. When he asked for help, I helped. When he wanted an opinion on a venue, I gave one. When Valerie asked whether the ballroom lighting was too harsh, I answered politely. I had learned to keep my work separate from the family story they preferred to tell about me. At the anniversary party, that old story was already circulating. Rachel was the creative one. Rachel was always busy. Rachel did something with events. Rachel was lucky to have a job she enjoyed. The words were not openly cruel, which made them harder to confront. They were designed to reduce me without looking like an attack. Then the event manager, Sam Ortega, walked over with a pale face. "Rachel," he said quietly, "the opening logo cue is not firing. The client loop is stuck in standby. Can you take a look?" Valerie heard him. She looked between us and laughed. "See, Rachel loves this. She gets to play with the lights." Sam did not laugh. He looked at me and said, "The production system is waiting for your authorization." For 1 second, the ballroom went very still in my mind. Not because I wanted anyone to feel ashamed, because I realized the room was about to see the difference between a story someone tells about you and the work that exists, whether they understand it or not. The truth was that I loved my work precisely because it was not simple to explain in one sentence. It asked me to understand people, space, timing, technology, and pressure at the same time. Some days I built a calm experience out of competing needs. Some days I solved problems before anyone knew they existed. I had trained myself not to need applause for that. But I had never agreed to let people use my silence as evidence that my work did not matter. The party was showing me that there was a difference between humility and erasure. There were moments when I wondered whether I should have chosen a career my family could display more easily. But then I would stand in a venue after a successful program and watch clients relax for the first time all day. And I knew I had chosen work that mattered to me. It was not embarrassing to care about how people moved through a room, how they received information, or how a difficult moment could become manageable. The embarrassing part was how often I had accepted someone else's shallow judgment as if it were insight. The run sheet was 43 pages long. Most guests would never see it. They would remember the music, the photos, the dinner, the speeches, and the way the ballroom looked when the lights changed. They would not see the list of cable paths, backup power checks, guest entrances, microphone assignments, projection cues, music fades, emergency contacts, vendor arrival windows, and timing notes that made the night feel effortless. That was the nature of my work. If I did it well, people assumed nothing difficult had happened. Sam led me behind the ballroom divider to the control station. The technicians were watching the main screen, which showed a frozen image of the hotel's welcome slide. On the console was the cue log. The first sequence, labeled Anniversary Opening 01, had been approved at 5:40 p.m. The next sequence, Northline Partner Recognition, was set to trigger after the first toast because the hotel was using the event as a small showcase for a new visual partnership with my company. The arrangement had been approved weeks earlier. The hotel had invited Northline's regional team to observe the system in a live social event before using it for a larger corporate program. I was not there as entertainment. I was there because I had reviewed the client-facing flow, negotiated the technical support, and signed off on the contingency plan. The problem was simple and annoying. A vendor had uploaded a revised video file under the wrong name. The system had been programmed to wait for a file that no longer existed. The solution was not dramatic. I checked the version history, found the approved file, confirmed the checksum with the technician, and cleared the standby loop. But while I did that, I saw the run sheet entry under my name. Rochelle Monroe, External Production Director, approval required for Live brand cues. I did not point it out to Valerie. I did not need to. Sam picked up his headset and said, "Rachel has corrected the file. Stand by for the Northline sequence after the toast." Then he turned to me. "Would you like to stay at the console or return to the floor?" I looked through the divider. My father was being called toward the stage. Valerie was arranging herself beside him, smiling for the guests. "Return me to the floor," I said. I wanted to hear the toast, and I wanted to see what happened when the system followed the plan they had already approved. At the console, I felt more like myself than I had in the ballroom. There were no family roles there. No one expected me to smile through a slight or translate my skill into something more comfortable. There was a problem, a system, and a team waiting for a clear decision. That was familiar terrain. I checked the file, asked the right question, and made the correction. The work did not care whether Valerie respected it. It required competence either way. That steadiness gave me back some of my own balance. I checked the timestamps against the equipment report, then asked the technician to run a low-volume test through the backup channel. The system responded exactly as it should. These were the details I loved, not because I wanted control over every second, but because preparation made calm possible. A room full of guests could never know how many small decisions stood between them and a successful evening. That was fine with me. I did not need the room to see the work. I only needed the people closest to me to stop pretending the work did not exist. I stood near the back of the ballroom as my father and Valerie climbed the small stage. My father looked nervous. He always did when he had to speak in front of people, even after 25 years of marriage. Valerie took the microphone first. She thanked the hotel, thanked the guests, thanked the caterer, and thanked herself in a way that sounded almost accidental. Then she began listing the people in the room. My husband's colleagues, our wonderful family, my beautiful daughter Lauren and her husband, my stepson Michael, who just started his residency. She paused when she got to me. "And Rachel," she said, with the same bright smile, who has always had a very unconventional path. The word unconventional landed exactly where she wanted it to. A few people glanced at me. Valerie continued, "But she keeps us entertained with all her creative projects." My father touched her elbow as if to move the speech along, but he did not correct her. I felt heat rise in my face. Not because I was unsure of what I did. I knew exactly what I had built. I knew every venue manager who trusted me, every junior producer I had trained. Every late night I had spent making a complex room feel calm to a client who was one problem away from panic. What hurt was that my father allowed her to make my work sound like a hobby in front of strangers. Then the toast ended. Sam's voice came softly through the earpiece, hidden under my hair. "Stand by, Rachel. Cue is live in 5. The ballroom lights dimmed. The gold projection on the walls faded into black. Behind Valerie and my father, the giant lead wall awakened. First came a clean white line, then a field of deep blue. Then the North Line Experiences logo unfolded in light across the entire wall. Below it, in smaller letters, appeared Live Event System Design and Production Partner. The guests turned toward the screen. A short video began: ballroom transformations, conference stages, non-profit galas, a packed theater, a hotel lobby glowing with visuals. At the end, a title card appeared. Regional Production Director, Rachel Monroe. No one had changed the video for me. It had been in the approved sequence from the beginning. But standing there beneath the logo, while my stepmother's words still hung in the air, I felt the room rearrange itself. Not because people suddenly understood every part of my career, because they could see that it was real. As the room darkened, I remembered all the times I had stood backstage while someone else was introduced as the face of an event. I had never needed to be the person in the spotlight. I was proud of the work that happened before and after it. But the screen that night was different because it was not asking me to perform confidence. It was displaying an approved fact. My name had been attached to responsibility long before the party began. That was why the moment felt so quiet inside me, even as the lights came on. I could feel my father's attention shift when the logo appeared. He had probably assumed my company was a small local vendor, the kind of business that supplied decorations and disappeared before dinner. I did not blame him for not knowing every detail. I blamed him for never asking. There is a difference. Ignorance can be repaired by curiosity. Dismissal survives by refusing curiosity altogether. That was what Valerie had practiced for years, and my father had allowed it because asking questions would have required him to see me more clearly. The applause was not for me alone. It was for the partnership video, the hotel, the equipment, the event that mattered. I did not want the moment to become a personal victory lap. But when the lights came back, the event manager walked to the stage and asked for the production partners to stand. Sam gestured toward me. "Rachel," he said into the microphone, "would you join us for a moment? This evening is running on the system she designed with our team." For a second, I considered refusing. I could have stayed at the back. I could have protected Valerie from the contrast between her words and the truth on the screen. Then I remembered how often I had made myself smaller, so other people would not feel uncomfortable, so I walked up. The stage was warm under the lights. My father looked at me with an expression I could not read. Valerie's smile had tightened. Sam handed me the microphone. "Would you like to say a few words about the partnership?" he asked. I did not look at Valerie. I looked at the guests. "I'm grateful to work with teams that understand production is not about making something flashy," I said. "It is about creating an experience where people feel welcomed, informed, and cared for. The best work is the work that lets everyone else have a good night without seeing the chaos behind it." That was all. I thanked the hotel crew. I thanked the vendor team. I thanked my own colleagues who had stayed on standby. Then I handed the microphone back. Valerie leaned toward me and whispered, "You did not have to make this about yourself." I turned to her calmly. "I didn't," I said. "You did, when you called my career embarrassing." Her eyes widened. "What are you talking about?" "You said it in front of everyone." I was joking. "I know," I said. That is why it kept happening. I stepped off the stage before she could answer. The moment Juan gasped. No one clapped for a confrontation, but I had said the sentence I had avoided for years. And once the truth was spoken in a room, it was harder to pretend it had never happened. After I stepped off stage, I went to the restroom and looked at myself in the mirror for a moment. My hands were steady. My face was flushed, but I was not ashamed. That surprised me. In the past, a comment like Valerie's would have stayed with me for days, because I would replay every possible response. This time, I had responded once, clearly, and then returned to the night. I did not need to win the room. I only needed to stop abandoning myself inside it. The guests moved back into conversation quickly, but the room was not the same. People who had smiled at Valerie's remark now approached me with practical questions about events, venues, and work. Their interest was not what healed me. Still, it mattered that I no longer had to carry the false version of myself alone. I had spent so long thinking I needed to make peace with being underestimated. That night showed me a different possibility. I could let the truth be visible and still remain calm. The party continued, but my attention stayed divided. Part of me was listening to my father laugh too loudly at a colleague's story. Part of me was watching Valerie move through the room, complimenting the flowers, as if she had not just tried to reduce my career in public. And part of me was still monitoring the production system through the small earpiece. At 8:17 p.m., a second issue appeared. The anniversary montage was scheduled to play before dessert. It included photographs. Family videos are not attend. The file was on the server, but the queue log showed a missing approval stamp. Sam came to find me again. "Sorry," he said. "We need a decision." The video vendor changed the final version after the client review. "The hotel wants to know whether we can run it." This was the kind of decision people called invisible until something went wrong. I asked for the final file. I watched the first minute on my tablet. There were photos of my father and Valerie, travel pictures, wedding photos, and clips of the family over the years. Then I noticed something strange. The opening card said, "Our complete family." The montage included Lauren, Michael, cousins, grandchildren, and neighbors. It included old photos of my father before he married Valerie. It included two pictures of me as a teenager, but there was nothing from the last 10 years of my life. Graduation. No first big event. No photo with my production team. No picture of my apartment. No evidence that I had become an adult separate from the version of me Valerie liked to describe. I could have refused the video because it had not been approved. I could have made the problem personal. Instead, I asked Sam to send me the approval thread. The email chain showed that Valerie had requested several revisions. One message said, "Please keep the focus on the family we see all the time." Rachel's work photos are not really the tone. There it was. Not an accident. Not a forgotten folder. A decision. I stared at the line for a long moment. Then I told Sam, "Do not run the unapproved version. Use the original approved cut from last week." "Are you sure?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "The original is the one we signed off on." That version included a simple slide near the end, a photo of me at a Northline stage build, wearing a headset, smiling at something off camera. I had not added it. The hotel marketing team had. And because the original version had been approved before Valerie started editing, it was still there. The missing approval stamp gave me a choice that was bigger than the video. I could use the moment to punish Valerie by refusing the montage, or I could follow the process I believed in and let the approved version stand. I chose the second option because my values mattered more than my anger. The original cut was not perfect, but it was honest about the partnership and about my place in the family's recent history. I wanted the room to see the truth, not a version edited to make someone else feel safer. When I gave Sam the decision, he did not ask, whether the family issue affected my judgment. He trusted the process because the process had been built to survive personal tension. That trust reminded me why I valued professional systems. At work, a clear approval trail did not make anyone cruel. It made responsibility visible. I wanted something similar in my family life. Not a courtroom, not a scorecard, but enough clarity that people could no longer hide behind confusion when their choices hurt someone. I saved the email thread before I did anything else. Not because I wanted to use it against Valerie at the party. I had learned that proof is most useful when it keeps you from doubting yourself later. The thread was clear. The video editor had asked whether to include the photo of me from the Northline site visit because the hotel had mentioned the partnership. Valerie had replied that it felt too career-focused and that the montage should stay with family images. The editor had asked whether my father agreed. There was no response from him. Then Valerie had sent another message from her phone. Please remove it. We do not need Rachel's work identity taking over the evening. She had not wanted my career visible. She had wanted me visible only in the ways she could control. That was the pattern beneath every joke. I was acceptable as the creative daughter, the helpful daughter, the girl who fixed things quietly. I was not acceptable as a professional with a name, a role, and a life that existed outside her version of the family. I forwarded the thread to my personal archive and closed it. Then my father found me near the service corridor. Are you okay? He asked. It was such a small question, but it came late. I'm fine, I said. He looked toward the ballroom. Valerie can be blunt. You know that. Yes, I said. I know. She did not mean to hurt you. That is not the point. He sighed, already tired of the conversation before it had begun. Rachel, it is our anniversary. Can we not do this tonight? I looked at him. Do what? I asked. Tell you what happened. He said nothing. Because I was not planning to make a scene. I am only done pretending her jokes. Do not cost me anything. He looked down at the floor. For years, I had believed his silence meant he was trapped between us. That night, I understood that silence was also a choice. It protected the person who caused harm and left me to carry the discomfort alone. I did not ask him to choose sides. I asked him to stop acting as if there were no side at all. I had learned to document difficult situations at work because memory becomes unreliable under pressure. Dates, versions, approvals, and names protected everyone involved. That evening, I used the same habit for myself. The email thread was not a weapon. It was a record that prevented the usual cycle, a hurtful comment, a denial, a claim that I misunderstood, and finally a request that I apologize for reacting. By saving the facts, I gave myself permission to trust my own experience without needing an argument to prove it. My father's response in the corridor confirmed something I had long suspected. He wanted peace without the discomfort of accountability. But peace and avoidance are not the same. Avoidance leaves the person who was hurt alone with the work of repair. I had done that work for years, changing the subject, smoothing the atmosphere, telling myself Valerie was insecure, telling myself Dad did not know how to intervene. The email thread made it impossible to continue protecting everyone else from the consequences of their choices. Dessert was served under low blue light. The original anniversary montage began exactly on time. It opened with my father and Valerie at their wedding, then moved through vacations, holidays, and family dinners. The guests smiled at old photographs and laughed at the hairstyles everyone wanted to forget. Then the slide appeared. It lasted only 6 seconds. A photograph of me in a black production polo, headset around my neck, standing beside a stage wall while a crew tested the lights. Below it were the words, "Rochelle Monroe, Northline Experiences Production Lead." I heard my aunt say, I had no idea she did all that. A former co-worker of my father leaned toward him. That is a serious role. My firm hired a company like that for our annual summit. My father did not answer right away. Valerie was watching the screen with a stillness that told me she recognized the photo immediately. Then, as the montage ended, the ballroom wall transitioned back to the Northline logo because the system was programmed to return to the partner loop between segments. The logo lit up behind the dessert table in deep blue and white. It was not dramatic because I made it happen. It was dramatic because it had been scheduled all along, and for the first time, Valerie could not reduce it to a joke without contradicting the room itself. The hotel's general manager approached me with 2 guests who were planning a nonprofit gala in the spring. "Rachel," he said, "would you be open to speaking with them next week?" They loved the flow tonight. I gave them my card. Valerie watched from across the room. I did not turn that moment into a message for her. I did not make eye contact. I did not smile in triumph. I simply took the meeting. That was the real shift. For years, I had waited for my family to validate my career before I let myself stand fully inside it. That night, I realized I had been giving them authority they never earned. The logo behind me was not a rescue. It was a reminder that my work had a life beyond their opinion. When the logo returned to the screen, I felt a kind of distance from the old need to be recognized. The guests were impressed, but I knew that professional respect could not depend on surprise. I did not want my family to value me only after a public display made it convenient. Still, I let the moment exist. It was fair for the room to see the truth. It was fair for me to receive opportunities that came from work I had earned. I did not have to shrink the moment to prove I was gracious. The new nonprofit meeting gave me a practical reason to leave the emotional center of the party. I did not have to stand around waiting for Valerie to decide whether she could be gracious. I had work to do, clients to serve, and a schedule that mattered. That was an important realization. I did not need to turn every family injury into the main event of my life. I could acknowledge it, set a boundary, and then return to the life I had built with people who understood the difference between a favor and a profession. Later, in the evening, one of my father's old colleagues approached Valerie near the bar. I was close enough to hear him ask, "So Rachel is with Northline. Is she the person who worked on the new hotel system?" Valerie's answer was slow. "She does something in that area," she said. The colleague smiled. It looked like more than something. Sam said she was the external production director. Valerie glanced toward me. Then he asked the question that made the air change. "Why did you call it embarrassing?" He did not say it loudly. He did not accuse her. He was genuinely confused. Valerie looked startled. "I was only teasing," she said. He nodded. "When's not change?" "Well, you should be proud. That is a lot of responsibility." I watched Valerie force a smile. I did not feel satisfaction. I felt something more complicated. Sadness that it took a stranger's recognition for the truth to become acceptable in the room. But maybe that was how family systems worked. Sometimes they only hear what you have been saying when another voice repeats it in a language they respect. My father came over a few minutes later. "I did not realize you were responsible for all of that," he said. I looked at him. "You could have asked," I said. He nodded slowly. "I should have." It was not a complete apology. It did not mention Valerie or the speech. But it was the first crack in the version of me he had accepted too easily. "I'm proud of you," he said. I wanted to receive it. I really did. But I also knew pride, spoken after public proof, was not the same as support offered before it. "Thank you," I said. "I need you to be proud when no one is watching too." He looked at me for a long time. Then he said, "I understand." I was not sure he did. But I had finally said what I needed to say. The colleague's question stayed with me because it was so ordinary. He did not intend to defend me. He simply expected a parent or step-parent to be proud when a daughter had responsibility. His confusion revealed how unnatural Valerie's comment had been. For years, I had treated her language as a private family flaw. Hearing it through someone else's ears showed me how often I had normalized disrespect just because it came from someone close to me. When I got home that night, I did not replay the party immediately. I took off my shoes, charged my tablet, and added the nonprofit meeting to my calendar. Then I made tea and sat in my quiet apartment. The ordinary rhythm of those actions steadied me. I was not waiting for Valerie to text. I was not waiting for my father to defend me. I had already heard the most important thing, my own voice, clear enough to say that the insult was not acceptable. The next day, my father asked me to meet him for breakfast. We chose a quiet diner halfway between our homes. He arrived early and sat in a booth with 2 coffees already on the table. That was his way of showing he had planned to take the conversation seriously. For the first 10 minutes, he talked about the party. He said the hotel had been beautiful. He said people kept mentioning the lighting. He said Valerie had been stressed and had not meant to create tension. Then I interrupted him. "Dad, I do not need you to explain her to me." He stopped. "What do you need?" he asked. I took a breath. "I need you to stop treating her comments like weather. They happen, and everyone else is expected to adjust. When she called my career embarrassing, you heard it. When she left me out of the montage revisions, you did not know, but you could have known if you had asked. I am not asking you to fight with her. I am asking you to recognize me when she tries to make me smaller." He looked at the coffee in front of him. "I have avoided conflict," he said. "I know. I thought staying neutral kept peace. It kept you comfortable," I said. "It did not keep me safe." That sentence made him close his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, he looked tired, not angry, not defensive. Tired in the way people look when they finally see the cost of a habit they called harmless. "I am sorry," he said. This time, he did not say he was sorry I felt hurt. He said, "I am sorry I let her define you in front of me." I nodded. "That is the apology I needed." He asked what would change. I told him I would no longer attend events where I was invited only to help, not to be respected. I would not review schedules, solve venue problems, or offer professional favors if Valerie used those same moments to mock the work behind them. He said he understood. Then I added, "And if she insults my career again, I will leave. I will not debate it in the room." He never. For the first time, the boundary did not feel like a threat. It felt like information. At breakfast, I was careful not to turn the conversation into a trial. I did not list every time Valerie had dismissed me, every joke, every interruption, every family dinner where my work was described as a phase. I did not need a complete history to establish a present boundary. I needed my father to understand one simple thing: silence had consequences. His choice not to interrupt had taught Valerie that she could continue. If our relationship was going to change, he had to become visible in it too. My father did not become a different person in one breakfast conversation. I did not expect him to, but he began sending small messages after that. A link to an article about a projection installation, a question about whether I was traveling for a show, a text before a family dinner asking whether I wanted to bring a colleague. None of these gestures erased the past. They were not supposed to. They were evidence that he was trying to learn how to see me without Valerie's translation. A month after the anniversary party, Valerie invited the family to dinner at her house. The old version of me would have gone automatically. I would have brought wine, asked whether she needed help setting the table, and tried to make the evening easy. This time, I replied with one question. Will this be a dinner where my work is treated respectfully? She called me within 2 minutes. You cannot be serious, she said. I am serious. You are still upset about one comment. No, I said. I am responding to a pattern. She sighed. You always make things so formal. My work is formal, I said. It carries responsibility. I am done acting as if I need to laugh when you insult it. There was a long silence. Then she said, fine, come or don't come. I am not walking on eggshells. I did not argue. We will skip dinner, I said. I hung up before she could turn the conversation into another debate about my personality. That decision felt strange. I had always believed boundaries had to be explained until the other person agreed. But agreement was not the measure of a boundary. Follow-through was. The next weekend, I went to a site visit with my production team. We walked through a new nonprofit venue, measured the stage wall, reviewed the projection angles, and discussed how to make a fundraising program feel warm rather than corporate. One of my junior producers asked me how I stayed calm when clients changed everything at the last minute. I smiled. You learn to separate the work from the noise, I said. As soon as the words left my mouth, I realized I was talking about more than the event. My work had taught me how to prepare, document, and respond without panic. Now, I was using the same skills in my own family. Skipping the dinner gave me an unexpected sense of relief. I spent that evening at home reviewing a proposal for the children's hospital fundraiser, marking changes in a client deck, and eating takeout on my couch. Nothing dramatic happened. That was the point. A boundary did not always produce a dramatic reward. Sometimes it simply gave me back an ordinary evening without the familiar dread of waiting for someone to make me smaller. I began to understand how much energy I had spent preparing for disrespect. The site visit that weekend reminded me that boundaries can make more room for joy, not less. Without the dread of the dinner, I had energy to be present with my team. We brainstormed a softer lighting plan for the hospital fundraiser. We talked about quiet rooms for families and accessible paths for wheelchairs. My work was built around anticipating needs before people had to ask. It felt fitting that I was finally learning to anticipate my own needs too. 2 weeks later, Valerie sent me an email, not a text, an email. The subject line was about the party. I almost laughed when I saw it, because emails were the format I used when something mattered enough to be clear. I opened it slowly. She wrote that she had been embarrassed by what happened at the party. She said she had not realized the Northline partnership was so significant. She said she had been trying to make conversation and that her joke had gotten away from her. Then she wrote one line that mattered more than the rest. I should not have described your work as embarrassing. It was not perfect. There was still a lot of language about intention. But she had named the action. I replied the next morning, "Thank you for naming it. Going forward, I need 3 things. No jokes that reduce my work, no use of my professional contacts without permission, and no requests for event help unless the scope and compensation are discussed directly. If those things are respected, I am open to rebuilding a more honest relationship. I read the message twice before sending it. I was not demanding admiration. I was asking for basic respect. Valerie answered several hours later. I can agree to that. I did not celebrate. I did not assume the pattern was gone. But a boundary in writing was different from a promise in the air. It gave us something to return to when the old habits tried to come back. I forwarded the exchange to my personal archive alongside the run sheet and the email thread. Not because I wanted a record of every mistake, because clarity had become a form of peace. Writing the boundary in an email also protected the relationship from vague promises. It made my expectations measurable. A joke that reduced my work was no longer harmless. A request for free professional labor was no longer assumed. A contact was no longer something family members could borrow because they knew my name. I had seen how clear scopes protected projects at work. Now, I was using clarity to protect myself at home. It was not cold, it was honest. After sending the email, I made a personal policy for myself. I would not accept unpaid requests that were framed as family help when they were really professional labor. I would not introduce clients to relatives without consent. I would not let a dinner conversation become a place where my career was treated as a joke. These were not dramatic rules. They were ordinary professional boundaries. Yet saying them out loud made me realize how many times I had allowed closeness to become entitlement. The next invitation came from my father, not Valerie. It was for a small retirement dinner for one of his longtime co-workers. The message said, "Rachel, I would love for you to come as my daughter. No planning, no troubleshooting, no helping. Just come and be with us." I stared at it for a long time. The wording was simple, but it showed that he had listened. I agreed to go. After the dinner, nobody asked me to fix the speaker. Nobody asked for a free contact. Nobody made a joke about my job. When someone asked what I did, my father answered before I could. "Rachel is a production director for Northline Experiences," he said. "She helps design and run the systems that make events work." He said it carefully, as if he had practiced. I smiled. The guest asked a few questions. I answered them briefly. Then we moved on to something else. That was what respect felt like. Not a giant announcement. Not a logo on a wall. Not strangers realizing your value after a public moment. Respect was being named correctly in an ordinary room. Valerie was quiet most of the evening. At one point, she asked me about a show I was producing for a children's hospital fundraiser. Her question was genuine, or at least more genuine than before. I told her about the design goal, making a large room feel less intimidating for families. "That sounds meaningful," she said. "It is," I replied. She nodded. I did not need more than that right then. Repair was not a speech. It was a series of moments where people chose a different response than the one they had chosen before. At the retirement dinner, I noticed how different my body felt when I was not waiting for an insult. I could listen to stories. I could enjoy the food. I could answer a question about my job without bracing for someone to turn it into a punchline. That was what repair was supposed to create. Not constant gratitude, but room to breathe. My father's introduction did not erase the past, but it showed he had learned something specific. That was more meaningful than a grand apology with no change behind it. The retirement dinner gave me a chance to practice receiving respect without over-explaining it. When my father introduced me correctly, I did not rush to soften his words with a joke. I did not say, "It sounds more important than it is." I simply thanked him. That small change mattered. I had often helped other people minimize me because I thought modesty required it. But modesty is not denying the truth. I could be grateful, grounded, and honest about the work I had earned. I still work in rooms full of lights. I still carry run sheets, backup plans, venue maps, client notes, and headsets that leave a line across my hair. I still stand behind curtains while a speaker walks on stage, listening for the exact second when a room becomes something people will remember. And I still go to some family events. But I no longer arrive ready to let someone else define my career before I open my mouth. The anniversary party changed something in me because it exposed a truth I had been avoiding. I had spent years trying to make my work sound respectable enough for people who had already decided not to understand it. I thought that if I explained it more clearly, worked harder, or stayed helpful enough, they would eventually see what I saw. They did not need more information. They needed a boundary. The company logo lighting up behind me was not proof that I had finally become important. I was important before the screen turned on. The run sheet did not create my competence. The guests' reactions did not create my career. They only made visible what had been true all along. That is the difference I carry with me now. I do not need a ballroom, an audience, or a logo to validate what I do. I need to stop accepting borrowed definitions from people who benefit when I stay small. My father is learning. Valerie is trying, sometimes. The relationship is not perfect, and I do not pretend it is. But the next time someone calls my career embarrassing, I will not spend an hour explaining why it is not. I will say one thing. That is not an acceptable way to speak about my work, and if the room does not change, I will leave it. Because dignity is not waiting for the screen to light up behind you. Dignity is knowing your name still means something when it does not. I still keep copies of the run sheet and the approval thread in a folder called Anniversary Party. I do not open it often. I do not need to. It reminds me that the most important proof was never the logo itself. The proof was that I had a role, a record, a team, and a life that existed independently of my family's approval. Once I accepted that, I stopped waiting for them to give me a definition I could give myself. I used to believe that family approval would make my achievements feel safer. Now, I understood that safety had to come first from within me. The folder in my computer was not evidence that I planned to hold a grudge. It was evidence that I had stopped gaslighting myself. I could remember what happened accurately, decide what I would accept next, and move forward without needing a dramatic final confrontation. That was the quiet justice I wanted, a life where my name did not shrink when someone else tried to speak over it.